Okay, so let's talk about something huge. How do you actually put a price tag on a whole company? It's one of the biggest questions in business, and today we are gonna break down exactly how it works. We are diving into business valuation. That's the million-dollar question, right? Or maybe the billion-dollar question. What is a business really worth? Whether you are trying to build one, invest in one, or you're just curious figuring this out, is like a fascinating puzzle. And like any really good puzzle, the answer isn't some simple number that everyone just agrees on. No way, it's complex. It's got layers. But stick with me, because by the end of this, you're gonna have the framework to make sense of it all. Alright, before we jump into the nitty-gritty of how it is done, let's back up a step. Let's talk about the why. I mean, why even bother putting a price on a company? Trust me, this is not just some boring academic exercise. This stuff is critical in the real world. Think about it. A founder wants to sell their company. You need evaluation. You're looking for cash from venture capitalists. You bet they want to see evaluation. We're talking about huge merger and acquisition, or even something more personal. We need evaluation. For all of these big moments, you have to have a number. It's the starting point for the entire conversation. Okay, and this right here, this brings us to the absolute core idea of this whole thing. Evaluation is not just about crunching numbers or going with your gut feeling. It's not one or the other. It's about blending them together. It's where art meets science. So, if you look it up in a textbook, business evaluation is just the process of figuring out the economic value of a company. But a really key phrase here is at a specific point in time. You gotta remember that. This is not some permanent price tag. It's a snapshot. And that snapshot, that value, it can and absolutely will change. And here it is, that blend of art, science, and action. The science part, that's the easy stuff to see. It's a hard data, financial statement, data analysis formulas, all the tangible assets you can touch. But then you have the art over the right, and this stuff is just as important, and maybe even more so. You cannot just plug that into a formula. That takes judgment and experience. So you might be wondering, how did the pros actually do it? How do they mix this art and science together? Well, it pretty much all boils down to three main ways of looking at it. Now look, there are tons of specific complicated formulas out there, but almost all of them fit into one of these three buckets. You can look at what a company owns, its assets. You can look at what similar companies are worth, the market. Or you can look at what it's going to make, its future income. Let's break down each one. Okay, first up, the asset-based approach. This one is probably the most straightforward of the bunch. You literally just add up everything the company owns, all of its assets, and then subtract everything it owes, all of its liabilities. The question is trying to answer is super simple. If we had a fire sale and sold off every single part of this company today, what cash would be left in our hands? But of course, it's never that simple. Even here, there's nuance. Sure, it's easy to count up the chairs and computers, but what about the intangible assets, like a patent or trademark? How much is that worth? And here's a huge one. Is the book value with the accountant says something is worth the same as its fair market value, where you could actually get for it today? They are almost never the same. Alright, method number two is the market-based approach. This one is probably the most intuitive for a lot of us, because we use this logic all the time in our own lives, especially with real estate. It is simple. You wonder what your house is worth. you look at what similar houses in your neighborhood just sold for. Same idea here. You find some businesses that were recently sold and use these price tags as a guide for your own. This is how it plays out in the world. Let's say you own a coffee shop. You see the competitor, which is pretty similar to you, sold for 900K. Now their revenue was 450, so they sold for a multiple of 2 times the revenue. Then you look at competitor P, they sold for 1.2 million on 550 in revenue, which is a multiple of about 2.2x. So, for your coffee shop with a $500,000 in revenue, you can make a pretty strong case that you are worth somewhere in 2 to 2.2 times range of 1 million to 1.21 million. This is how that works. And last but not least, we have the income-based approach. Now this one is all about looking forward. It's less concerned with what the company owns today and way more focused on how much money it's expected to make in the future. This is the go-to method for valuing companies that are all about the future growth potential, like a hot new tech startup. Okay, but this is where the art side of things really comes into play. You've probably heard of things like DCF or discounted cash flow analysis that lives here. But think about it, you are basically guessing the future. How reliable are your financial projections 5 years from now? And then you have to apply something called discount rate to account for all the risk. Basically saying $1 in the future is worth less than $1 today. And picking that rate is one of the most subjective, most debated parts of the entire evaluation process. So you do all the hard work, you run the numbers for all the 3 approaches, and here's the kicker. You get 3 totally different answers for the exact same company. The asset method says it's worth 1.2 million. The market method says no, it's 1.8. And the income approach, which is all about the future potential, it's 2.5 million. So which number is the right number? The answer is none of them, and also kind of all of them. C. The final evaluation is almost never just one of these numbers. It's a synthesis. It's a negotiated value that takes all 3 of these perspectives into account, and then weighs them based on the specific company and the situation. That is the art of the deal. And that brings us to what I think is the most important takeaway from all of this. Evaluation isn't really about finding some single magical number. It's about something much, much bigger than that. You know, the legendary investor Warren Buffett had a quote that just nails this. Price is what you pay, value is what you get. The price, that's the final number in the contract. That's one thing. But the value, the story, the team, the potential, the quality, that's what you are actually getting. And that's what really matters.